The Kite Runner is the focus of this video, and it's looking at a past Section B question for the Political and Social Protest paper with Lit B. The question came up a few years ago, and it was the question about masculinity being toxic. All the male characters are vile. And again, I've highlighted in this question what the examiner is expecting you really to either talk about or disagree with. That word all in green there, if you know the novel confidently, know that that statement is untrue. In fact, there are lots of male characters in the novel that aren't vile, and therefore that gives you a perfect opportunity to debate this task and disagree with it, and that would make good AO5. So in yellow here, the adjective vile, masculinity is toxic. We're focusing therefore on men. And in the boxes underneath here, I have given you a list of, 8 characters, some of which are vile and some of which aren't, which might offer students the ability to really answer this question quite confidently and perceptively. I wouldn't expect students to talk about all of those characters, but they would pick maybe 3 or 4 of them in order to focus on in order to write their answer. It might be useful to pick one character that isn't vile and maybe 2 that are, or vice versa. It's up to you. But disagreeing with this task might be a very fruitful way to enter into a confident discussion. So you might want to pause the video now and just bullet point or think about why these characters might be useful in answer to this question. Or you can continue watching and you can see the example answer that I have written to show you how you might want to approach this particular question. So for the purposes of this video, I'm going to be focusing on these 4 characters only: Zaman, Hassan, Asef, and General Tahiri. And I'm going to be using Hassan and Zaman to disagree with this task, and Asef and General Tahiri to agree with it. The fact that I haven't spoken about Amir, Baba, Rahim Khan, or Farid doesn't mean I'm going to fail this question. It means that for me, in my judgment, which is what the examiner is interested in, these are the characters that I thought, in my view, would be useful in discussing this task. So you're going to be marked on what you do right, not what you don't. So this means that I'm going to be writing essentially 4 paragraphs, 1 for each character. Even though there is no requirement to begin your answer for section B with an introduction, 1 sentence such as the top of this response might be a good way to do it if you did want to begin in some way. Basically summing up my whole essay, really. Whereas Hosseini's novel is full of flawed male characters who are vile, such as Asef and General Tahiri, it is not the case that all the men in the novel are horrible, as evidenced by Hassan and Zaman. So that acts as almost like a topic sentence. It tells the examiner that you are on task, and it shows that you have selectively and confidently chosen 4 men to talk about in relation to this question. So I begin this response by talking about Hassan. Hassan represents the sacrificial lamb in the novel. In the early chapters, which focus on the harmony of childhood in Afghanistan before any sense of war, Hassan is described as always stepping in to take the blame for Amir when hitting the neighbour's dog with walnuts. Even though this is a more simple example of loyalty, it reinforces Hassan's consistent ability to sacrifice his own innocence and freedom for Amir. In chapter 5, when Hassan and Amir are confronted with Asef and readers meet Asef for the first time, Hassan acts with complete courage in defending his friend against Asef's nationalistic hatred. By threatening Asef with the slingshot after he brandished his brass knuckles, Hassan sacrifices his own safety for Amir. Furthermore, the same selfless heroism is seen a generation later in Sorab, when he similarly uses a slingshot to defend Amir against Asef during the fight. It seems that Amir is always saved by someone else, even though his saviours are always inferior in status and wealth. During the rape scene, Amir describes Hassan as having the look of a lamb. This not only echoes the same haunting look of the sacrificed sheep during Eid, but also reinforces Hassan's depiction of goodness and innocence. Here, Hassan has sacrificed himself for his friend and his kite, a trophy of Amir's success, as well as the key for him to unlock Baba's heart. Hassan's execution shows the atrocities endemic in Afghanistan during the Taliban's rule of the country, and how standing up for the truth and what is right is the principal cause of Hassan's demise. It is impossible to say all men are vile or toxic in the novel with Hassan's presence. So clearly disagreeing with the task here. As well as Hassan, Zaman is another character who proves that not all men in the novel are vile or present toxic masculinity. Although a minor character and only featuring in one chapter, Zaman proves that men are capable of good things. As an orphanage owner, his main responsibility is to look after lots of children who have lost their childhood. Even though he is of no relation to these children, Zaman's kindness in using his own money to buy the orphans food and try to keep them alive and safe shows that, in the midst of all the fear, destruction, and violence, people are capable of doing good things and showing humanity to fellow human beings. Even though readers may initially believe Zaman is selling children to the Taliban, which is what Farid initially thinks, it later becomes clear that Zaman is in such a terrible situation, that he's in such a terrible situation where if he doesn't let the Taliban have one child, they take many. So it is better just to let the Talibs take one child in exchange for food. This is unconscionable to readers, but in a war, a lot of unconscionable things take place, and readers may sympathise with the predicament he is in. Zaman putting on his broken glasses is a metaphor for the hopelessness of Afghanistan during the Taliban years and how kind people suffer. However, even though Hassan and Zaman prove that not all men in the novel are vile, some of them undoubtedly are. Asef, as the embodiment of a nationalist and extremist agenda, acts as the antagonist of the novel. In the early chapters, such as chapters 5 and 7, he represents a threat to the harmony and equilibrium of childhood in a country that is not yet ravaged by countless decades of war and military intervention. His role as a neighbourhood bully, flanked by his disciples Wali and Kamal, foregrounds the later threat he poses to Afghanistan more broadly as a member of the Taliban. Gifting Amir Hitler's autobiography, and also using derogatory language such as flat nose and describing Hazaras as polluting our homeland, shows his potential to be radicalised by an extreme agenda that poses huge dangers to those he labels as inferior. In the novel, readers see absolutely no redeeming features for Asef, making him thoroughly dislikable. He is responsible for Hassan's rape, as well as Sorab's sexual abuse in the second half of the novel. He is literally presented as having blood on his hands after the stoning at the Ghazi Stadium, and his sunglasses suggest that he is soulless because the eyes are often described as being windows into the soul. Just add a D there. There we go. Asef reinforces how political movements can create a dystopia for certain persecuted groups. Asef fails to realise that, in his quest to make his Watan more in line with his utopian vision, he is making Afghanistan worse and a representation of suffering and a dystopia. Believing that he is legitimate for causing all of the bloodshed and suffering is convenient and typical of totalitarian theocracies who corrupt religious scripture to justify their outrageous behaviour. In this sense, Asef can definitely be labelled as vile. So Asef there being used to agree. Finally, General Tahiri could also be accused of having a vile presence and a toxic masculinity in the novel. The general represents a tyrannical force within the domestic sphere of his family, Jamila and Soraya. Soraya's dreams of being a teacher are often dismissed or quashed by her father, who would prefer her to become a lawyer, doctor, or politician. His daughter's infertility and option to adopt is also dismissed by the general because of the ambiguity about whose blood an adopted child were bringing to the family. As a result, the general focuses on Nangan and Moose more than any kind of empathy and kindness. He also punishes his daughter for running away with a man by forcing her to cut off her hair, which is equivalent to an assault. In this sense, he is a vile man. Even though it could be argued that his antagonistic tendencies begin to dissolve after Amir has married Soraya, glimmers of his arrogance and toxic masculinity are seen in the last chapter when the family are having a meal and Sorab has been brought back to the US. Rather than having a mature conversation about Sorab or showing any happiness that he now has a grandson, instead he goes back to his old ways and focuses on ethnic differences. Why is the Hazara boy living with our daughter? To this, Amir stands up to him. You will never again refer to him as a Hazara boy in my presence. This is an example of Amir finally having the courage to stand up for what is right, but also shows the general's defeat. To this end, despite showing moments of kindness, such as after Baba's death, General Tahiri for the most part is vile and can be used to agree with this question. All right, so a lovely discussion there. 2 characters to agree with the question, 2 characters to disagree. So hopefully that was useful in showing you an example response for the masculinity question for the Kite Runner that I believe was in 2022 from memory. Okay, notice that my references are there where necessary, but I'm not referring to theory, I'm not referring to critics, because you can get AO5 by showing a confident interpretation of the text, as in your interpretation. So I'm not here distracted by putting in what Joe Bloggs thinks about the novel, or what Marxist theories think. It's kind of not relevant, and it can often detract from a student's own ideas. Okay, so thank you very much for watching, and good luck in your studies, and all the best in your upcoming exam. Thank you.